Hi, everyone. Welcome to The Future of Energy, our ongoing monthly series presented by the Institute for Science and Policy and the Denver Museum of Nature and Science. My name is Trent. I'm with the Institute, and we're thrilled to see so many of you spending part of your day with us. Thank you. So this is episode 5 in our series, and thus far we've been pretty technology heavy, looking at specific innovations in different sectors that are going to be driving the next energy transition. And today we're shifting ever so slightly to look at one of the more human dimensions of energy, and that's accessibility. The idea that energy is affordable, available, and that's not something that everyone can take for granted, unfortunately. We are looking at a situation where approximately 1 in every 4 Colorado households struggles to pay their utility bills and seek some form of relief. That's only been exacerbated in the time of COVID. So we're going to be unpacking the idea today of what it means to have energy that's affordable for all, available to all, and the bearing that that has on the wider energy transition in Colorado as a whole. Because the state has set forward pretty ambitious decarbonization goals. We know the Colorado Climate Action Plan has targeted 90% reductions in carbon emissions by 2040, and that's going to require change at scale. We have to make sure that everyone can come along, and that we're going to be talking trade-offs, programs, options, all kinds of great things today. I am just delighted to be joined by Jennifer Gremmert, who is the Executive Director of Energy Outreach Colorado. That's a not-for-profit organization empowering people through energy security. Jennifer has worked for numerous nonprofit organizations, including the National Office of Junior Achievement, Up With People, the University of Arizona, and the University of California. She has served on the board of directors of the National Energy and Utility Affordability Coalition, and as chair of both the Governor's Commission on Low-Income Energy Assistance and the Colorado Utility Consumer Board. In 2017 and 2020, she was recognized as one of the Denver Business Journal's top women in energy, and she has extensive expertise in regulatory and programmatic solutions to ensure that vulnerable families have access to affordable, reliable home energy. Jennifer, thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So I wonder if we could jump right into discussion and unpack this term of energy accessibility a little bit. What does that mean in your eyes? And then maybe you could tell us a little bit about what Energy Outreach Colorado does in the state.
Sure. So I'll really be speaking to this from the consumer perspective. And accessibility to me is really ensuring that everyone has access to the energy that they need to secure a healthy home for themselves. And so what Energy Outreach Colorado does and has done over the last 30 years is really a number of different things to support, stabilize, and sustain Colorado families. So we support families by helping them pay their energy bills so that they don't get disconnected. We also work to ensure that they have heat in their homes by repairing or replacing heating systems. We run large-scale energy efficiency programs to improve the health and safety of their homes, of families' homes, while also reducing their energy costs and participating in that greenhouse gas reduction. We do a lot of education of trying to get people to understand how they use energy in their homes, how they can save energy. And then we do a lot of public policy work around ensuring that energy is affordable, reliable, and accessible. So that's done both at the Public Utility Commission and at the General Assembly. And so to me, it's really about energy equity, ensuring that we have the systems and programs and processes in place that everyone can thrive in our community.
How widespread of an issue is energy poverty here in Colorado? And maybe you could talk a little bit about some of the regional differences around the state, rural versus the urban corridor.
Yeah, we really see when we think of energy poverty, one of the ways we look at this is energy burden. What percentage of people's income are they spending on energy costs? And in some parts of the state, we have people spending up to 10 to 15% of their income just to keep up with their energy costs. And so as we see other costs, go up, that's challenging. So pre-COVID, just as you stated, about 1 in 4 Colorado families qualified based on their income for the programs that we work on. it's been somewhat exacerbated because of COVID. So we're seeing a lot of folks that are underemployed, unemployed. They just cannot meet their, get their ends to meet. They just don't have that income that's able to sustain them. And so this is something that we look at very differently regionally. So the urban corridor kind of running Fort Collins down to Trinidad has one set of issues. Eastern Colorado has a different set of issues, and even resort communities. So again, when you think of the consumer aspect of energy, we have Xcel Energy, which is the large, combined gas and electric provider in the Denver metro area, but there's 65 other utilities in our state. We have municipal utilities like Fort Collins, City of Fort Collins, City of Colorado Springs, that run municipal utilities, gas, electric, water, stormwater in some cases. We have rural electric cooperatives. So for example, if you live up in Greeley, Atmos Energy is your natural gas provider and Xcel Energy is your electric provider. And so when we think about a home in that community, we have to coordinate with both of those utility companies. So there's a lot of integration, speaking, to different issues, rate designs. But we also have a lot of households in Colorado that still use propane or wood as their primary heating source. In fact, in southern Colorado, there's 4 counties, Conejos, Saguache, Castillo, and now I think Alamosa, where 25% of the people that we serve use wood as their primary heating source. So as we start thinking about this energy transformation and what that's going to mean for a lot of the households we serve, this can be incredibly beneficial, that we're going to get them into a regulated utility that has really a lot of health and safety benefits. But the delivery infrastructure that we have for the contractors that we use, all the technical aspects that you've been discussing, relate to this consumer delivery as we've learned. I mean, it's getting more complicated and highly nuanced.
I'm curious because for many of us, the utilities are the key touch point, mostly because they're the ones who send the bills. But there's a whole other network of stakeholders involved in accessibility, from municipal governments to this Colorado State House to nonprofits such as yourself. Could you tell us a little bit about the landscape and how some of those players interact around this issue?
Sure. So we work very closely with the state of Colorado. There are federal assistance programs that are managed by the Colorado Department of Human Services or the Colorado Energy Office. And we support, funding for those programs, accessibility for those programs, but there are limitations to what they can do. And so when Energy Outreach was created, it was really to fill in a lot of those gaps. So the way that we deliver our resources is through a network of partners. So on the energy assistance side, families can come into an organization like a Salvation Army or the Catholic Charities or La Puente Home down in Alamosa that they need emergency assistance. So that may be with food, with rental assistance, and at that point we can provide direct energy assistance, and that's a credit right onto their utility bill. So those are really the touch points that we have in every single local community across the state. We really do partner very closely with utility companies. We want families to know that they should contact their utility, explain their situation, get them on a payment arrangement. We really try to coordinate so that, again, we remove that disconnection. But we also coordinate, especially on the advocacy work we do, with environmental organizations, large associations, the Colorado Oil and Gas Association, AARP, the Colorado Center on Law and Policy, anyone that's doing advocacy work around vulnerable households, and really making sure that they're educated on what's happening in that energy and utility space. I think it's also really important to know that we have over 350 contractors across the state. So these could be HVAC companies, insulation companies, lighting companies. So when we think about, the energy efficiency work we're doing, and again, as we look at this transition that's coming, how do we ensure that the households that we represent have access to all this innovation and opportunity to reduce their cost, to better integrate their energy with, all the other opportunities that are going to come through that transition without being left behind. And so it's requiring a lot of education on our end to make sure that we understand the most updated building sciences, that we're connecting with all those, associations that do mechanical contracting, new construction, that we're looking at what's happening with climate change and environmental policies in municipal, communities, specifically Denver. I've been serving Denver Climate Action Task Force and now on Energize Denver, really setting the tone for what other communities within the state can do. And then also tracking this at the state and federal policy level, because these, threads of this work are continuing in so many different areas. Mm-hmm. So lots of stakeholder partnership.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there any case studies from the last couple of years, any examples that stand out where your work was able to, really make an impact in a particular community or around one particular implementation, so to speak?
Yeah, what's really great is we've had a lot of actual national recognition through ACEEE, which is the American Council on an Energy Efficient Economy, on the energy efficiency programs that we've delivered over the last decade, specifically with Xcel Energy, but also with some of the other utilities like Black Hills Energy, Atmos Energy, that have been really innovative. We have a nonprofit energy efficiency program where nonprofit organizations that serve vulnerable households, so think of shelters or food banks or affordable housing, transitional housing, when we can help reduce their energy costs, then they're able to put more of their operating budget into actually helping households. That's been an incredible support, especially now since so much demand on those services have increased. We've done some really innovative work with Xcel Energy on community solar gardens. So Xcel is building 100% low-income community solar gardens on the land of old power plants. And then our organization is subscribing that energy to help reduce energy bills moving forward. We're constantly thinking about how do we innovate and improve our systems and processes and programs to better deliver to households. We've done a lot of innovative work on that crisis intervention program, which is the furnace repair and replacement program. We had an example of a 90-year-old woman who's been without heat all year and who was finally able to apply for the LEAP program, which is the state program. And within 48 hours, we had a furnace installed in her home, so she has heat. And that's just one of many examples. Another critical example is we've just worked on a house in Eagle, Colorado. It was a family of 5 in a mobile home. They called because they called their utility company. They felt something was wrong. The furnace had to be red tagged. They had to be moved into a hotel. There was some health issues. And again, within the network, we were able to get them energy assistance. We were able to upgrade the home to replace the heating system, add highly efficient lighting, insulation, air sealing. That's going to improve the health and safety of that house, of that home. And again, there's not a lot of affordable housing in that part of the state. And so being able to sustain that housing and make sure that people can afford it and be healthy in it is just absolutely, our pleasure, but also a really important thing that we need to figure out how to scale as we move through all of the transition, both, within the climate section and climate world, but also with just our income inequality that's being, again, really highlighted through this COVID impact and what those increased health costs can mean to households. Every little part that we can do to improve that affordability and accessibility, as we're discussing, is just absolutely critical. And we have, 25,000 examples of that we did in 2020. So we're really excited about this work.
That's terrific. Well, and you bring up an interesting point about retrofitting more generally, the idea that there are lots of structures, residential, commercial, all around the state that will need an overhaul, especially as we're moving toward these deep decarbonization targets here in the next couple of decades. And all of that, of course, comes with a very high price tag at scale. Are there any strategies that you've come across that you and your partners work on to try to, out with the old, in with the new, so to speak? Or is there, can you just speak to that question a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and this is something we've just really seen develop, over time. A lot of this is being driven by policy, as we have in Colorado done a good job of adding renewable energy, energy efficiency. We're starting to have more discussions around electrification. One of the things that we're always thinking about is, we're sort of agnostic when it comes to fuel type. We want, again, people to have reliable, accessible, affordable energy. And when we're doing a lot of furnace replacements right now, or helping a family on propane, convert to maybe even natural gas, that's a very affordable fuel right now. It's been incredibly important for the families that we've served over the last decade to have that affordable energy. Recognizing that that is changing, we have to make sure that we don't, create solutions that then leave people behind. And so we're really looking at the balance of all of this, seeing absolutely the opportunity of converting some homes to electricity and what that can mean for the health of that home and that community, but also really recognizing that we have to balance those costs and interests and making sure that as we, I think there's a lot of tension right now around the speed of this transition that's coming and the cost that's being anticipated, and that's a natural tension. And I think our work being at the intersection of energy, housing, and health, it's really imperative for us to keep coming up with innovative ways so that we can, again, scale this. We've done a lot of work in multifamily affordable housing where we've seen huge success. And what's been really interesting now is some of the work we did to add ventilation has been so critical of having positive indoor airflow in homes. One of the things we always enjoyed, at least I've lived here 25 years, is you could open your windows at night, and let the cool air in. Well, if you lived in a community that had a lot of wildfires, that wasn't available. And so what did that mean for cooling your home and letting fresh air in? And how are we going to keep adapting to those things and being cognizant of them, while also recognizing that a one-size-fits-all solution doesn't necessarily work, and that we do have to be conscious of cost and how that's going to impact the families we serve.
We talk a lot about at the Institute in our programming about trust in science, trust in data, using data to make informed policy decisions. How does that play into your work at a community level? How do you go into communities perhaps, or go talk to legislators and present information and use that to drive the decision-making process?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really, really critical, and it's really hard to do. I'll give an example. We did a lot of work in the Elyria Swansea neighborhood that was part of the Central 7 deconstruction project that's being worked on. So there was funding that came from the Department of Transportation to mitigate the indoor air quality of homes. We really layered that on with our expertise in energy efficiency and the rebate programs that we manage for Xcel Energy and our partnership with the city and county of Denver. And we were able to mitigate the impacts of that construction on over 300 homes that are within sort of 500 feet of that space. Now, what came out of that was really a lot of non-energy benefits. We saved people a lot of money on their utility bills. We improved the indoor air quality. We obviously improved, the technology within the home. But, there were a lot of health benefits that came from that. And that's the part where we're struggling right now, is how do we collect that data? It's somewhat invasive to go into someone's home and install new insulation, and there's many interactions that have to happen. There's a trust level that has to happen. And even with COVID coming into play, we were able to adapt our procedures, frankly, so that we could safely continue that work at the most critical time we needed to. But then we're also asking people about how do you change your behavior around energy, and that's a difficult thing to do. And so I think we have to really continue to look and see where those data points are. We monitor this work nationally. We're constantly looking for research partners on this, but it is absolutely important. So we collect a lot of data now into a central database. We work again with our utility partners to help identify households that have the most opportunity for savings. And then again, we have a lot of community partners that will identify those households. One of the unique partnerships we have right now is with Children's Hospital, where they identified several zip codes that have had really high incidence of repeat emergency room visits, primarily due to respiratory problems. And so their health navigators partnered with our staff to identify homes that could really benefit from that home energy efficiency, but also health retrofit. And now they're able to start tracking what those health benefits are so that we can show that this investment is not only just reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but it is providing really significant health and cost benefits to households that we, can calculate for many years to come.
So we've alluded to some of the effects of COVID. I'm curious how that has impacted you both in the short term of the last year or so, but then also any ramifications that you can foresee over the next several years.
Yeah, well, we were incredibly fortunate. We had done a lot of strategic planning work in the last couple of years and really built up our internal systems and structures. And so when COVID hit, we were able to pivot pretty quickly. And I know that's a word that's really overused, but that's exactly what we did. And so we actually served 40% more households with energy assistance in 2020, and we really kept all of our numbers stable in terms of our furnace programs, our efficiency programs. We did some innovative work with Black Hills Energy down in Pueblo, where we delivered over 5,000 kits, home energy efficiency kits that people could do self-install, to improve, reduce their bills, and just, kind of kept looking at what are ways that we can improve this. I think one of the things we learned is that the agency partners that we, help to deliver our assistance across the state, that was a really big shift for people that would normally come into the office, have someone to talk to. There was a lot of technology challenges that we had to overcome and trust issues, sharing information in a way that's a little bit different. But I think, again, it was so amazing how our programs absolutely were at the right place at the right time to help meet the needs, right? We saw utility companies set up moratoriums so they weren't disconnecting households, so we could get people really educated on how they could set up those payment arrangements. But then we were ready, we were successful at the legislature in securing just under $10 million this year for additional energy assistance. And so we anticipate that moving forward, there's new opportunities, and we already have sort of the systems and mechanisms to deliver that support.
Mm-hmm. I'm looking in the chat here. Paul asks about heat pumps. Do you have a sense of how many heat pumps have been installed, or is that a technology that you're turning to frequently?
We're starting to do some pilot work in that space. The few that we've worked on have been expensive. So that's kind of that balancing act. One of the things we're identifying in the households we serve is just that heat pump technology may be beneficial, but there's a lot of other work that has to happen in that home for that technology to be successful. And so I think that's something that we're really anxious to continue to do. We're looking at that both on the multifamily side, so our large partners that, maybe 100 units or more, and then also on the single family side. So it's certainly something that we're monitoring. I know the older heat pumps are, the technology is changing so fast. So just like 10 years ago, when we couldn't imagine, the price of solar, I think, we'll be in that same place 10 years from now. And so I think it's just, how do we keep up with that evolution? We're certainly, trying to bring in, we have utility funds that come through a demand side management plan that was just, it's being, finished right now. And so, and again, policy drives some of that so that there's funding that's set aside. We just recently participated in Xcel Energy's transportation electrification plan. So again, we intervene and it's an adjudicated process. So we have attorneys and expert witnesses that participate in that. And we were really pleased with the amount of emphasis on equity and ensuring that all Coloradans can participate in that particular plan and really see a lot of opportunity there. But recognize it's going to be a lot of education. And again, where we're in homes now, where we're installing energy efficiency equipment, where we're doing bill payment assistance, that's a really good time for us to educate about these other programs.
So I'd like to pivot us a little bit into some of the advocacy and public policy space, if we could. I'm curious about energy outreaches, advocacy efforts, and some of the things that you're doing at the State House, and maybe some things that you're working on this year.
Yeah, so we just did our kind of annual report for 2020, and we were in 16 cases of the Public Utility Commission last year, which is a record for us. And so again, every time there's a rulemaking or a rate case filing, demand side management program, we've gotten more involved in the renewable energy standard filings. And again, now we have the transportation electrification. We also did some work on consumer protections that passed in the 2019 legislative session and 2020. So we're, following up on all of those things. And it's a really exciting, important work that's helping to save money, for all ratepayers, but then specifically targeting additional assistance to the families that we represent. We do similar work at the at the Capitol. So as I mentioned, this year was a lot about COVID relief and making sure that people had access to, energy assistance. We're monitoring many bills that are going to be introduced this upcoming session. And again, I think it's really important to ensure that the families, again, that may not have a voice, that we can hear what their problems are, what their barriers to access are. Sometimes it's, a structural impediment, sometimes it's a policy impediment. And so what we're always looking at is how do we improve, availability and accessibility. And again, we partner with so many different stakeholders in that space. One of the players we've been working a lot with are the Colorado energy consumers, which are large industrial customers. And while we don't always agree on things, they have sort of a different philosophy on how they want energy, rate design for the large consumers you can imagine. But we're both consumer groups. And so we think about this and how do we ensure that this transition happens. We don't want to be obstructionists, but we also really want to make sure that there's a balance. And it's very complicated. Like I said, we certainly understand the need for greenhouse gas reduction. We absolutely, understand that the families that we represent are most impacted by, climate incidents, whether it's fires or floods. They may not, the families we represent may not be able to adjust as quickly. That those costs do, and the health impacts do, challenge them. We see and I think, again, race is a really important conversation here because, we serve a disproportionate amount of minority communities with the programs that we serve. And so that income inequality and how all that connects into these larger conversations is something that's absolutely being considered. I think we were really pleased that the governor's greenhouse gas reduction roadmap, has an equity framework, and that there's really an authentic conversation that's happening in every single filing that we've been in around this. And I think it's a subject that's going to keep, being amplified as, our economic situation is still so precarious.
So as we record this, we're about 24 hours away from the Biden administration. Obviously, there'll be some things that you'll be looking for in Colorado this year as well. Could you tell us a little bit about some things that you'll be watching for both on the national policy landscape and here in the state that you will be looking for, encouraged by, hoping to see? Give us a little preview of 2021.
Well, we definitely have been, hearing that there's going to be some work on green infrastructure. I think when you have people out of work, the best way to put people, thing to do is put people back to work. And a lot of Energy Outreach Colorado's programs kind of evolved out of that American Reinvestment and Recovery Act back in 2008 and 2009. And again, we were at the right place at the right time, had a lot of these programs and partnerships in place. And again, because we work so closely with utility companies, that is a good place to be. Our model is really how do we get these resources back out into Colorado communities? We have to think about those nooks and crannies of the state. And I think there's a lot of workforce development opportunities that are going to come out of this. We certainly see the COVID relief through both the stimulus package that was passed in late December. There's, again, it's so funny when you are on all these different associations and, so many different national groups that are trying to predict, right? And so you need some time for the administration to get into place. But we're certainly excited, that the belief in science is there, that we can use data to prove that the investments that we make in these households and the work that we do to ensure families can afford energy is a good one. That makes all of our economy safe. And it's funny when I think about science, because I was a political science economics major, so it's that social science and political science that still has to come into play, that there are good ways of delivering these resources, and then there are ways that make it difficult. And so I think our role is to really make sure that we take down as many barriers as we can while still making sure the due diligence of the funding that's publicly funded, taxpayer funded or ratepayer funds, are well spent, well invested. But we absolutely believe that the households that we represent need more help than the average household. So we need extra supports and extra certainty that these households won't be left behind as all of this happens, because it's all going to happen fast and furiously. But again, feel really good about the partners that we have, and there's lots of really smart people, and most of them in Colorado, or have roots in Colorado, that are helping to drive these decisions.
Well, I'm curious too about some of the collective action problems inherent in an energy transition. The idea that individual actions can, certainly make a difference, but what we really need is change at scale, and how that plays out in the sense of, just to name a couple of examples. Maybe I want to have an all-electric car, but I park on the street, so I don't have anywhere to charge it. Or I want to put solar panels up, I'd be all about it, but I live in a multi-family big condominium unit, and there's no way that I will ever get all 27 other owners to agree to foot the bill for solar panels, for example. Can you talk about some of those types of challenges and how you mentioned that behavioral science really comes into play? I'm curious if you have thoughts about overcoming some of those particular challenges.
Absolutely, and that's a really good point when it comes to accessibility. You may be a person that wants to participate in this green, change, and for some of those reasons you can't. And so that's where I think this, thinking about it from all different angles, from not just sort of the Denver-based perspective, but what happens if you live in Durango or Alamosa or Meeker. And I think that that's what we have to be really conscious of, and bringing more allies and stakeholders together in this work. And I will say, as participating in this recent transportation electrification planning, there were really some innovative ideas that came up. And I think, again, people are looking at what's already been developed across the country and what makes sense for Colorado, because Colorado is a very different scenario. We don't have a regional transportation organization. We have, large vertically integrated utilities. And then, like I said, we have smaller municipal and rural electric cooperatives. And so they all have different needs that need to be considered in this. And I think also for those households, and how do we ensure as many different options? And I think that's the biggest thing that I'm looking at, is that options are really important. And there's a lot of interesting things on the electric, vehicle side around community hubs, where we don't have to just think about vehicles, but can we think of electric bikes and electric scooters, and sort of that last mile from the public transportation side. And when we think about it, it's not just generation is the only, culprit in greenhouse gases, but the transportation industry and the building industry. And so how do we bring all of those policies together? And I think for, again, the households that we represent, we want those folks to have access just like everybody else with innovative technology. As we start to see battery storage increase, that could be really beneficial to some of the households that we work with, so that, we think about if there was a shared electric vehicle that was at a multifamily site, and then there was battery backup that could then benefit, reducing the institution's bill. I mean, I think there's so many things that are being thought about. I think with Xcel Energy adding in advanced metering infrastructure, that two-way communication and being able to really engage with your utility company. I think for a long time, we just were encouraged to sign up for electric bills, and you don't even know what's happening. And when I say, like, how do people get engaged with this, like, read your bill, like, actually read it. I mean, I still get my paper bill because I'm a geek and I like to look at this. But I think that that's something just to look at. Look at the difference, in months. Look at how you engage with it. What are things that you can do in your household? And I think it's going to take that collective action of individuals doing this. And so some will be policy driven through mandates, and some will be through incentives, and then some will just be because the market's driving.
And that's such a great point. We've seen how technology can drive behavioral changes just by activating our desire to interact with data in a different context. A Fitbit, you have the cost of the device, but then if it keeps you on track with your calorie count, or it encourages you to tune into your health maybe in a way that you hadn't before. A smart thermometer would be similar in this context. So I think that's such an interesting thought, that if we get the right combination of technology and implementation, that perhaps we can encourage an entirely different mindset.
And I think it's going to take patience. I mean, I think these things take time and they have to evolve. And I think, again, we're so much more integrated with our home than we used to be because we are home, right? I mean, and even some of the families that we see, their kids used to get most of their meals at school, and they're not going to school. They used to get maybe some health care at school that they were receiving, or some checkups or things like that. And so how that community interaction really impacts a person's livelihood. And so as we start to, drive these innovations and technologies, we have to remember those households that are just operating in crisis, that need a little bit more assistance to be able to do that. They might need more information, they need more time, they might need more subsidy. And I think that, recognizing that if we can do this correctly, and I think we're at the cusp of this right now, where there's so many new things coming into fruition at the same time, with this view of equity and this lens, then we can really do it correctly. And I'm really, excited about the opportunities. I do think that this new administration, and I think, again, we have a governor that has been driving this administration for so long, and I think there's really good leaders, that are striving for this, so it's exciting.
Viewer Shelley writes in with a question: how can local citizen groups get involved in helping with the transition, with helping to install or facilitate more efficient energy systems for these households?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I would certainly encourage people to look at our website, which is energyoutreach.org. It has all of our local partners. So whatever zip code you live in, we have a partner there that, can help. I think it's really, doing that research. What's we're struggling with right now is getting into households. It's hard right now, especially with the vulnerable, older adults that we work with. And so for us, we really partner with community-based organizations to do that, again, which there are many. I think the larger environmental groups are also having a lot more of a lens on equity, and so they're directing people to local community partners to do this. There's a lot of great groups out there. I mean, I'll throw out a couple in the metro area, but Mile High Youth Corps is a great one. Mile High Connects if you're interested in transportation issues. Certainly email me if you have any specifics, but I think, what we look at folks to do is to, again, engage with your energy bill, understand it, and start to learn about how you're personally doing it. Certainly help organizations like ours if you have the means, to contribute and to help us support more households across the state. I would encourage people to read the greenhouse gas reduction roadmap. There's a lot of really good information in there, and they point to different organizations doing good work. I think there's more organizations. I think certainly the Institute has lots of great resources on its website. I think this is the time. If you're interested in this is a great time to get more engaged.
Well, I think that's a great note to wrap up on, and we're certainly excited to see what lies ahead for this administration, and certainly the next year is going to be pretty interesting in this space. Jennifer, I want to thank you so much for joining us. This has been a great discussion. Thank you for coming on and sharing your expertise, and we hope to stay in touch with you, and we'll make those resources available.
Great, thank you.
Thanks so much. And thanks to our audience today. We're thrilled to have you spending time with us. And thanks to my colleagues at the Institute for Science and Policy. Thanks to the Denver Museum of Nature and Science that makes it possible for us to host this series. If you're interested in finding a recording of this episode or any of our previous episodes, those are all available on our YouTube page. Just search Institute for Science and Policy. We also tweet out the recordings on our Twitter page, Facebook. You can find us in all the usual places, and please do sign up for our newsletter to get the invitations for all of our future sessions. We'll be back next month in February. We're going to be talking green buildings, sustainability, building integration, design. Should be a fun session, so we hope that you will tune in again, and we'll talk to you next time. Stay safe, everyone.